Hi everyone, this is my fourth video. I wasn't sure what I was going to read today because I knew I wanted to read something from There Once Lived a Woman Who Tried to Kill Her Neighbor's Baby by Ludmilla Petrushevskaya. But the problem is every story in this collection is exquisite. It was translated from Russian by Keith Gesson and Anna Summers, and they did an absolutely beautiful job. If you like Mikhail Bulgakov, or even if you wish you liked him more, check out this collection. She's wonderful. I have a link down below where you could purchase this if you'd like to. And I couldn't choose a favorite, but today I'm going to read the story, My Love. Given time, his dreams might have come true, and he might have found himself with the woman he loved, but the road was too long, and it brought him nowhere. All he had with him that barren time was a page from a magazine with a photograph of the woman he loved, and in fact only a few people from work knew it was her. It was just a pair of legs, that was all, a little chubby at that, bare, in heels. She herself had immediately recognized it, by her purse and the hem of her dress. How was she to know that her lower half was being photographed? The photographer had rushed out into the street and taken a few quick snapshots, but they published only the hem and the legs. He, this man, kept the photograph tacked up over his desk at home, and his wife never brought it up with him, though she was a strict woman and ran the entire household, including her mother and her children and even her distant relatives and students. On the other hand, she was also a kind, generous, hospitable woman. She just didn't give any slack to the children, and also her meek mother lived with them, lay on the cot, read aloud to her little grandkids while she still could, and enjoyed the warmth, peace, the television, and then afterward she spent a long time dying, also meekly, barely alive now, and went without much fuss in the end. As for him, having buried his mother-in-law, he began waiting patiently for his wife to die as well. For some reason he knew that she would go first and set him free, and he began to prepare for this event very actively. He was healthy and athletic, went running in the mornings, even toyed with weights, kept a strict diet, and in the meantime managed to work like a bull. He was promoted to the head of the department, traveled abroad, and waited. His chosen one, the pretty, plump little blonde, every man's dream, she looked like Marilyn Monroe, worked in the same place as he did, and sometimes came along on business trips. And that's when their real lives would begin. Restaurants, hotels, strolling and shopping, tours and talks. How lonely he felt on those nights when he had to descend from heaven back into his hell, into the warm, poor nest where his graceless, cramped home life slowly bubbled, where his children got sick, went crazy, ran around like maniacs, not allowing him to concentrate, so he had to quiet them down, and sometimes this meant strapping them with his belt, after which he felt even more insulted and humiliated. His wife screamed at the kids too. She had no time for anything. She could barely turn around in that apartment, which, as in any decent household, they also had a dog and a cat, and the cat would howl all through the night when she was in heat, and the dog would bark every time the elevator reached their floor. The nights were the worst. He would lie in his bed and fall into cheerless dreaming of the warmth, calm, and beauty that emanated from his forbidden friend on their trips abroad. When they weren't together, she too was hounded by life. Her husband and her mother-in-law literally hung on her neck, her mother-in-law forcing her to scrub the apartment every Saturday, to the point where she was scrubbing the tiles in the bath with ammonium. Her husband would get drunk and forbid her to go to office parties, birthdays, or to anything else, always made trouble before her business trips, suspected her of everything. Together, he and the mother-in-law were crushing her like Scylla and Charybdis, and what's more, they fought each other, the husband and his mother. The mother-in-law was always demanding to know of the pretty blonde why her husband drank so much and ate so little. Even that was her fault. The girl would complain about it at work, but only very obliquely. She was discreet and never threw it all up in his face the way his wife would. Sometimes you find a woman like that, the lonely husband would think as he tossed in his bed. while on the other side of the wall his children cried and whimpered in their sleep, and his wife snored heavily because of her heart problem, growing older and more loving with each day. Now here was something the mind could never grasp, how she, a dried-up old woman past 40, so loved and so took such care of him. It seemed as though she could never quite believe that this elegant man with his handsomely graying whiskers could be her husband. In fact, she was too shy to accompany him anywhere. She tailored her uniformly plain dresses herself, long and baggy, the better to hide her girth and the runs in her pantyhose. There was never enough money to buy new ones. This was known as dressing modestly and tastefully by the many guests and relatives who came crowding in during the holidays, devouring her pies, cakes, and salads. They were all her guests, not his, her classmates, her colleagues, her relatives. They remembered her young and pretty, with cute dimples and a long, thick braid, and they didn't even notice that she was already someone else, that she had dimmed. In fact, she'd long since disposed of her braid and her dimples, and instead toiled for her husband and her mother, raised the children, loyally ran for him, her lord and master, to the fresh food market, didn't have time for anything else, and yet miraculously was always everywhere on time. She tried so hard to be organized. And naturally at night, having put everyone to bed, she'd sit in the kitchen with her books or work for extra cash, or else prepare her classes. Coming home from work, she'd tell stories about her students, and once in a while she'd cook a whole bucketful of meatballs and a bucketful of kasha, and her students would come. They'd bring flowers and even make a bit of noise, and shyly they'd eat up everything and then entertain her with their clumsy singing. But this was only if the man of the house was away. Otherwise it was out of the question. When the kids were born, a boy and a girl, even then her first thought had been of her husband, making sure he had breakfast before work and a warm dinner after work, and that she was available to listen to everything he wanted to tell her. There was only one interruption, when her mother started dying, and then continued to die for 3 years. Then everything was cast aside and just kind of hobbled along. It wasn't clear how, and the man of the house was reduced to self-service in the kitchen, to eating breakfast alone, whatever had been left out for him, and eating supper by himself, and then withdrawing into his room, as gloomy as a storm cloud. But still he was there to carry the coffin, and was indistinguishable in his genuine grief from everyone else. After the funeral, the grandmother's room remained empty and closed. No one had the strength to do anything about it. And in fact, the wife quietly resisted doing anything, slept in the big room with the kids, or rather sat, as always, in the kitchen. Sleep had abandoned her. For the husband, this was a difficult time too. His love began complaining, demanding a real, independent family life. She refused to accompany him any more to friends' empty apartments during lunch. And she went even further. She started flirting with the men in adjacent offices and in the cafeteria. And the men, sensing that she'd let down her guard, as they put it, beat a path to her door, and her telephone rang off the hook, and someone came to pick her up in a car, and so on. Our husband endured the torments of hell. Love and duty tore him apart. He took a hard line with his girlfriend, though he did occasionally find solace in crying on her shoulder. What could he do? The wife, for all her desperation and grief, nonetheless noticed that her husband had also somehow dried up, that his eyes had gone dangerously blank, and that he was just drifting away. She roused herself, quickly fixed up her mother's room, and moved in there with the kids. And the main room again became a meeting place for guests and talks and little parties, and the husband would greet the guests as the father of beautiful children and the head of a household, and not as an abandoned homeless dog, and as a beloved, worshipped husband, not just anyone. Now he received his breakfast before anyone else, and suddenly a few new dresses were sewn from cheap cotton, and on Sundays the wife began taking the kids away for long excursions to the park, the circus, the planetarium. But in the husband's room the photograph still hung, with its skirt, its bare, chubby legs and the heels. He wasn't giving up. Finally, thunder shook them all. The husband of the blonde, our husband, as the illicit couple called him, came apart at the seams, completely lost it, chased the blonde around the apartment with an axe. She locked herself in the bathroom until evening, then somehow slipped out of the house, called our hero from a payphone, and he ran to meet her and didn't come back until it was almost morning. A few hours later, he was again woken by a terrible, as all news is that comes at dawn, phone call. The husband's mother had found him hanging in the doorway from a rope. Of course, the new widow spent the next month with some caring friends who took pity on her, and meanwhile our husband couldn't bring himself to invite her over. And eventually the friends who had taken her in had to terminate the blonde's stay. She was just too pretty, pale and in mourning, so that the husband of the house had begun to experience toward the blonde certain feelings of platonic friendship and sympathy, which are much more dangerous than our plain human filth, in and out, and then it's over. The man's wife kicked her out. It took a while, but eventually things settled down. The blonde was given her own apartment, and someone decided he wanted to buy the old rundown place where the mother-in-law still lived. He convinced the mother-in-law to trade it for a smaller place, closer to her niece, and the blonde got a place farther out and less attractive, but still her own. And here our husband, our hero, finally had to choose once and for all, yes or no, and start remodeling this place and find furniture, fix the wiring, winterize the windows, etc., in his girlfriend's new apartment. Instead, he began setting up his own household with renewed vigor, wallpapered the main room with the help of the kids, once again started exercising, poured cold water on himself in the mornings, started running, and he began looking after the kids, drilling them, because they'd grown up and were getting in the way, was the thing. With the blonde, he remained in the role of counselor and visitor. She took care of everything herself. That occupied her time. She asked for advice, showed him floor plans, and already there was someone else coming around. He had a car, he brought her hard-to-get tiles for the bathroom, and even harder to get kitchen furniture. The blonde assessed the situation correctly and kept everyone in sight, faced with the prospect of loneliness. The photo still hung above his desk, and already he had an assigned day for visiting the blonde. He had, incidentally, left the institute where they'd worked, his relations with it having soured when she, the blonde, was supposed to be promoted and get a raise, but was turned down because others complained. He left in protest and promised to bring her with him eventually, whereas his wife didn't understand anything and just shone with relief. And there was a party in the house, and they baked pies because the husband had finally left her, although the photo still hung in its place. He did well in his new job, and the little kids grew up athletic and tall, well-mannered, the way kids can be when they're in a family that worships its father, strengthened by the love and servitude of its self-effacing mother. The word of the father was law, and that's how they walked, in order. The father first, then the children shoulder to shoulder, and then behind them a bundle of a mother, directing the family from a distance as with a remote control. It was a joy to see them, though the photo of the legs was still there. The mother of the house waited until the boy, the younger one, entered college, and then surrendered entirely, just as her mother had done. Standing in the kitchen one evening, she collapsed in front of everyone, began to choke, and continued choking for 3 nights in the hospital. The family, disciplined and hard-working, instantly regrouped. They set up a watch in shifts, and old friends and relatives came to help, as well as her long ago and still loyal students. And from the other side, from inevitable death and oblivion, the husband rescued his wife. By the time they brought her home, she was already a shriveled old lady. The only thing she could move was her right hand, and only a little. She would make sounds with her lips that no one could understand, and often often. A tear would come running out of her eye. It was as though she were apologizing with her whole being for this state of things, apologizing for her entire former life, for not being able to create anything for her demigod, and in the end making herself a cripple. In time, the members of the household grew used to this heavy burden, although sometimes they'd grow frustrated and yell at one another. All those bedpans and daily baths and bed sores, and then thoughts, involuntary thoughts, about how long this could go on, how many years this animal or even vegetable state. They suffered these thoughts. But the husband seemed to calm down suddenly. His soul became anchored, and all his movements around his wife were soft, patient, his voice gentle. The kids still sometimes screamed at each other and at their mother. They had their own uncertainties. They were losing her, their foundation and their pillar, and they became weak, unsteady parents to her. They felt that something was wrong, that they didn't have a future, or rather that they did, but it was awful. The kids blamed each other, said everything to each other, and oh God, in front of their mother. But their devotion did not diminish. Their mother lay there clean and fresh, and they put a little radio transmitter next to her pillow, and sometimes they'd read aloud to her. But still she often cried, for no reason at all it seemed, and would try to say something with just vowel sounds without using her tongue. On the night she died and they took her away, her husband collapsed, and in his sleep he heard her. She was there, and she lay her head down on the pillow next to him and said, "My love." And after that he slept happily, and at the funeral he was calm and dignified, though he'd lost a great deal of weight, and was honest and upright. And at the wake, when everyone had gathered at his apartment, he told them all that she had come to him and called him "my love." And everyone froze because they knew what he said was true, and the photograph no longer hung over his desk. It had disappeared from his life. It had all evaporated, just ceased to be interesting at some point. And suddenly, while still at the table, the husband began showing everyone the pale little family photos of his wife and kids, of all those excursions they'd taken without him, all their fatherless entertainments that were so poor but so happy in the parks and the planetariums to which she'd brought the children when she tried to make a life for them on that tiny island, the only one still left her, where she shielded the children with herself, while towering over everything was that photo from the magazine. But the photo was gone now. Everything was fine, and she'd managed to say to him, "My love," without words, already dead. But she had done it. Thank you.